Hey, I'm Christy. I am in a little bedroom in Oregon. My son and his family recently moved into a new home, and I am here kind of helping them get things sorted and unboxed and all that stuff. And while I'm here, I created this project that I'm going to share with you, and it is a crocus medallion, like a little cameo type thing, and it's three-dimensional, but then there's some other little crocusy things in the background too. And the idea from this came for when I got here, it was just winter turning into spring when the crocuses come popping out, and this new place that they have, the previous owner had planted lots of bulbs, and so there were crocus everywhere. And I haven't seen crocus for quite a while because, as you know, I live in Maui and have been there for 4 years, and the previous place that I lived in was not a place where I had a lot of bulbs. So I haven't seen them for years and years, but it was so wonderful to come here and be greeted by this little hello of happy crocus flowers. They're so pretty. So I decided to use those as an inspiration for this project. So I'm here making do with the stuff that I have in my little room, which means that no matter where you are and whatever space you have to create, it's enough. It may not be ideal. It may not be what you wish you had, but it's enough to get started. So let's let that beautiful spring light filter in and give us inspiration for our little blooming crocus project. Shall we? Let's do it. What are we going to need for this project? Well, first of all, polymer clay. I chose to make the crocuses out of kind of a pale purple color, and I just used white and actually used a little powder, pan pastel powder, to create this purple. But whatever clay you're using, I'm using Primo. If you want to put a little bit of purple in there to get this really pale kind of a lilac color, that's great. You may have a different color you want your crocuses to be. Google crocuses or go outside if they're starting to pop up in your lawn right now and see what color you like. Anyway, get that. I used a pale purple. Then we're also going to need a bit of green for the leaves and other assorted things like that. And some pale blue for the medallion that it goes on, because we're making kind of like a cameo, so to speak. And I just mixed white with a little bit of gray granite. Actually, I used the turquoise granite. So Primo makes a color called turquoise granite, which I love, and I just mixed that with white to get this. And I didn't mix this all the way. I kept a couple of striations in it just for funsies, so you can do the same. And then just a little bit of white or yellow for the crocus stamen in the middle. I used white and powders. Speaking of powders, so I'm using pan pastel. That is always my powder of choice. It sticks beautifully onto polymer clay. It's very durable. It's really fun to work with. So I mostly use this purple, and this is violet. And then I used a little bit of this magenta shade. Yellow for the stem, and this is Diary Glide yellow. And then whatever greens you have around. I happen to have chrome oxide green today. And you'll need some various brushes to apply the powders, all right? Now, powders will go on your clay and just stay. They do not need to be later set with any kind of satin glaze or anything like that. You're certainly welcome to, but it's not going to need it. You'll also need some clear tape because we're going to use that to take powder off. I'll explain. We're going to use a little bit of liquid clay. Obviously, I'm using translucent liquid Sculpey because I'm using Sculpey product clay, which is Primo, but all the liquid clays kind of work well with the other liquid clays. So use the one for the brand that you're most comfortable with. I love Primo and the liquid Sculpey stuff. Then finally, tools. So I'm using an assortment of tools. We're using wire cutter and pliers because, oh yes, we need a little bit of 20 gauge wire of any kind. And I am also using just sculpting tool, a scratch tool, needle tool, those kinds of things come in handy. And then, of course, my absolute favorite of the sculpting tools is the Wow It's Awesome tool. And you can get that on my website. I will have a link in the description taking you to my website and for my tools and stuff, taking you to my Amazon influencer page for powders, etc., etc. Okay. You'll also need some kind of heat-resistant surface to work on. And this is because we're going to use a heat gun And I'm using a big old honkin' heat gun. Usually I use an embossing gun, which are the smaller craft versions, whichever one you are familiar with and use. This is what I happen to have today, so that's what I'm using. And then I often work on a glazed tile like you can get at the hardware store. This is a glass, like a Corel glass plate. So I'm going to be able to work on it, heat on it, put it in the oven, that kind of thing. Obviously, it's polymer clay, which is an oven curing clay. Make sure you have an oven so that you can cure it when you're done. And pasta machine, of course, helps make blending those colors a little easier. All right, that's everything. Gather those up and let's get going. So just a little bit about my setup today. Now, normally I'm doing this in my Maui studio setup, but right now, as I make this video, I'm actually in Oregon. So I'm making do with things that I find around the house because I don't have my full setup. Normally I would work on a tile. I forgot to go buy tiles. So I'm using a glass plate, which can go in and out of the oven, no problem. And I've got all my other stuff around here. I did remember to bring a second set of studio lights, but as we go along, you'll see that I'm maybe making do with things that I don't normally have. So we're going to just play with this and see what happens. So we're making a crocus today and having our little purple clay. You can make crocuses come in a number of colors. You can make a yellow one or a pale blue one or a deep purple or a white with purple stripes, whatever. I'm just making a little bit of a light purple and I'm going to be making petals. Now, the reason I'm going to do the petals and make them baked and hardened first is I really want that flower cup to kind of open up and sort of stand out three-dimensionally, okay? And then we will be creating a little background. We'll put some other little like painted style of crocus in the background to make a like cluster, and then our three-dimensional one can stand out. And then we've got a wonderful little medallion. Later on, I could turn that medallion into a wall piece, add mosaic around it. I could incorporate it into a larger scene. I could use it to decorate the side of a vessel. There's a lot of things you can do. You can make this smaller and have it as a brooch, or if you like really big jewelry, this would make an amazing focal piece for a large jewelry statement. All right. So anyway, we got stuff coming up. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the little petals, and we're going to bake them. So as I mentioned before, we'll need a heat gun for this. If you don't have a heat gun, it's okay. You can totally use your oven and just partially bake them as we go along. I'll tell you all about that, but I'm going to use a heat gun for that. So the first thing is we're going to make our little ball of clay. And I found that this is about the right size to make a petal about this big. Now, I made these petals a little bit more pointed. Some crocus have a kind of narrow pointed petals. Some have rounded. Some almost come indented, almost like a sort of like a heart. So Google crocus and see the kind that you like the most. When I first got here to Oregon, because I've been staying for quite a little while to help them with the move, it was the end of winter and the crocus had all popped up, which is amazing. So I got to kind of look at them and be inspired by them. And I wish that I had saved some, but how can you? Crocuses are there and then they're gone. But I took some pictures, and that is what is inspiring me in what we're doing. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to turn this thing into a bit of a teardrop, right? And I'm going to flatten that out so that this is going to become this little stem part here, the lower end of the petal. And you notice how I'm just kind of flattening that, right? And what I want to do is I want to make it pointed at the tip, but I want the top of that petal to be nice and full. I've done a couple of them here. You can see that it's kind of full up at the top. And I'm just going to keep pinching and pulling and flattening. And as I go, I'm kind of doing it a little at a time, and see how flat I'm getting it. And I want this little piece here to be very flat too. So often I find that it gets a little longer than I need, so I can pinch away the excess and just make sure that it has a nice little base to the flower petal. And if you go look at a crocus, you'll see that's kind of typical of that. And we'll see how that works. That's going to help us position them once they're done. All right, so once I've got something like this, now I've got some little plastic that I'm working on. So I'm going to use this little bit of plastic because I can peel it up a little bit better than I can on the glass. So I'm going to press that down, make sure that the petal shape is nice. And this is a trick that I use often, is just kind of putting it upside down to see how it looks upside down. Sometimes some of those irregularities can show. And then I want to see if it's the same size as the other, because this one looks a little bit bigger, right? So even this is not the same size as that. So this is not bad, but I feel like it's just a tiny bit bigger than I want. So I'm going to pinch a little bit more off and make that a little bit more like the others. Okay, that's about the right shape. Now there's a number of ways to make the beautiful little striations that most crocus have. And I tried a couple different things. Like one of the things that you could do is do like a cane style where I'm layering different colors of white and purple. That is great, and you can do that. But the crocus have these little side stripes too. So it's not just the up and down this one, but then they have some that kind of go off in either direction. I chose to do it with powders and with my needle tool to make the indentations, just because I felt like it. I like using my powders. That made me happy. But that's not the only way that it can be done. So you can experiment with a number of things. One of the things that I tried doing was taking a strip of white and putting a nice layer of purple pan pastel, and then cutting and stacking, running it through the pasta machine, and it gave a beautiful, very thin stripes, but they were very subtle. So I thought, you know what, that's nice, but let's just do this. I'm not going for subtlety in this one. I'm kind of going for a big in-your-face sort of flower. So what I'm going to do now is take my needle tool, and I'm just going to run some lines down the center, and these are going to get filled up with powder to make the purple, and they just kind of go straight. They don't really curve much. And then there's some of these little curvy lines which are actually quite detailed, and I gave up after kind of looking at them for a while and just thought, you know what, I'm just going to make lines like this that go on each side, and that gives enough of the look. All right, now you'll see this a little better once I start putting the powder on. So now let's play with powder. I'll keep just one of those for inspiration. I just got some pan pastel, and this one is Violet 470.5, but any purple powder will work. You guys know that I love pan pastel. It really grabs, which is important because I'm going to be manipulating this by picking it up and smushing it and things like that. So I want a powder that's not all going to come off in my hands, which pan pastel is that powder. So I've got that there, and I'm going to take my trusty little tape and take it off because I only want it down in those cracks that I made. And you guys know this trick. This is just a game changer of a trick to where you can just take your surface powder off and leave it down in the cracks and the crevices that you've made, which I just think is so cool. But the trick to this trick is that you have to use enough tape to get everything off the surface. Otherwise, it's going to look kind of messy. Now, I've noticed that in here, some of those little lines are not as deep as maybe I wanted. So I'm going to give them a couple more, just another hit of powder, and see how I'm getting the powder down inside. It doesn't matter if the powder's on the surface, because we're taking the surface off. It only matters if the powder is down in those cracks. So you're going to want to really push it down in there. And the tape, once the tape has powder on it, it's done. You can't like keep using the same piece over and over and over again, just so you know. Okay, so now I've got this, and I'm going to gently peel that off and touch it with my fingers all over. And I want to make sure that I've got some powder on the inside and the back side. So I'm going to take just a little bit of this powder, and I've also got kind of a magenta as well. So you see that, a little bit more raspberry. We can use that too. And I'm just putting a little bit on the back side. It would have those same striations, but I'm not messing with that right now. So I've got that there. And then I am going to put a little bit more here down on the stem, because it's usually darker down there. And then I'm just kind of putting a little bit up in here to give it that sort of stripy feel that a crocus would have. All right, so we're going to heat this thing and make this gentle curve. And the way we're going to do that, take your plastic off, and you want to have a heat-resistant surface, in this case, glass. You could use a tile. And I'm going to take a little bit of toilet paper, and I'm going to roll it with just a little moisture and turn it into this sort of petal shape, okay? So that will allow me to curve this. So I'm getting this warm with my fingers, because if it's not warm, it's going to crack along those little lines you did. So get it warm in your fingers and sort of curve it so we've got that nice little petal. shape, that crocus petal shape. And then I'm going to actually kind of try to grab it onto the plate here so it'll stay put. Otherwise, my heat gun will just scooch it all over the place. All right, so normally I would use an embossing gun, but what I have is a heat gun. So this one is a big old honker, and it's much hotter. So you have to be careful not to overdo it. You have to be careful about the rest of your clays, get them out of the way so that the heat doesn't start hardening anything. And you want to be very careful about going too long. So this will go a lot faster than the normal heat gun would go, but they work great. So again, this is making do with what I have, and this is what I've got. It's quieter too, that's nice. And you kind of just have to let it cool and feel. If it goes too long, it starts bubbling. And that means you're melting it, essentially, which is probably not recommended. So, don't do that. And then what you want it to be is not brittle, sort of flexible like cooked clay is. And I think that's just right. All right, so now we've got some petals made. So you can see how I've got 4 petals now. Crocus has 6 petals. I'm gonna go ahead and do all 6 petals, and then we'll put them together. Okay, so we've got all of our petals. Now we're going to make the stamen in the middle, and let's get that heated up. And we'll do some little bit of leaves while we're at it too, and we'll just kind of do all the heat gun stuff first. Remember that this plate is hot, so if we're going back to do clay work directly on this plate, you're going to want that to cool down a little bit first so it doesn't interfere with your creation. All right, let's make that little stamen. Okay, so I have just a little snippet of 20 gauge wire. And I'm actually going to use just some white clay. You can use the yellow, but I think I'm just going to use white because I've got it. Then I can use yellow powder for the yellow. I don't know. I like that. But, either way, it's going to work. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to create a little snake that goes on this wire. And I don't want it to be very thick, and I'm also kind of leaving the end of the wire exposed so I can trim that if I want to, or stick it into things or whatever. So I'm just taking this and I am squishing this on, trying to make it very thin, and the tip is going to be just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to take a little bit more ball of clay, kind of plop that on there. You can start with a bit more of a snake so that thick head part becomes the end. That would work too. And I think on a crocus, this is sort of like triangular shaped. So we can shape that just by pinching it a little bit and making sort of that triangle feel to it like that. I'm going to press the end in so we can see what we've got going on here. Just 3 little snippets like that. And then there's just some little filaments that come up, and we're just going to make those small. Now, if you're doing a saffron crocus, then those would be long and floppy, but we're not doing that. We're just doing a regular old crocus. So I'm just taking these little snakes and kind of putting them, and I didn't look to see how many there are in a crocus. We should probably do that, huh? And we are going to get this heated up as well. So I just want to make sure that those little things are sort of sticking out a bit. And we're going to use a little ball of clay to hold it up while I put powder on. And that means I'm going to get some of that wire exposed so it doesn't get permanently stuck in here, but we'll see. All right, so we've got that. We've got the little stamens sticking out a little bit. And we're going to just use our powder. And that's always part of the fun contrast with the crocus. You've got that beautiful flowery color. I think I'm going to hold it like this. purples and pinks and stuff. And then that bright yellow stamen is just kind of a fun contrast. Now the center part can be quite orangey. So if you want to add a little bit more orange-ish color in there, you can. I think I'm going to just go just with the yellow. I kind of like just like that. And this is Diary Glide Yellow 250.5, if you are keeping track of that. And let me just take this little end and stick it back in here, because now we're going to dry it going straight down on it. Now this is one of the neat things about polymer clay, is that you can bake it like we're doing here, having a partial bake. And then when you go back to bake it again, it's not a problem. It's not going to over bake. It'll be just fine. So it's a great way to firm up delicate pieces or pieces that you want to stick up and not droop when they get into the oven. Okay, so now we have all the components of our three-dimensional crocus, right? What I thought we would do is just sort of make a background with some painterly crocus in the background to create sort of a depth of field. And then this three-dimensional one can be popping up. Oh, but wait, we forgot to make a few leaves so that they could stick out. Some of them will be flat against the background, but a few leaves will be sticking out. So for that, we need some green, which I have some green right here. And let's make a few sticky out leaves. For this, we're going to want the wire as well, and we're going to bake them or heat set them with our heat gun because we're going to want them to be able to be sticking up, which means they need to be firm, and that wire is going to help. Now, you could just bake, pre-cook them like this and then put them in and go bake it, but when they get hot again, they can droop a little. Obviously, polymer clay responds to the heat, so once it's in there, then they might flop. But if that wire is in there, then you're going to be okay. So this is how I'm going to do it, is I'm actually going to make this a little bit thicker. I'm going to fold it over so I have like a sandwich with the wire in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to take this green and I'm flattening it up nice and flat like this. And then I'm going to take a piece of my 20 gauge wire. I like 20 gauge for most all armature related things. Okay, so I'm placing it like this. It's not all the way up at the tippity top because we'll get there. And I'm folding it over like a little sandwich or burrito or whatever. Okay, so just simple as that. I always find the tips is the hardest so that you don't see the wire sticking out. That can be hard. And I have this tool, the scratch tool. I'm just going to kind of scratch some lines in like this and on the other side as well. And as always, we're going to use some powder. So I've got just a chrome oxide green 660.5. And I'm just going to put a little, this does two things. It takes away some of the shininess of the polymer, which I really like. I don't really like it super shiny, especially for organic things like this. And then, of course, it just gives it some color variation. I'm going to put a little green on there, too. And let's just go ahead and cook that up a little bit. Just a couple more of those so we have a few that can stick out of different sizes, and then we'll kind of play once we start assembling. We'll play from there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's like a little teeny bubble there. That's what happens when it starts getting too hot. The clay actually gets so hot it bubbles, so you want to be watching for that and not letting that happen. And you see when you've got that seam on the side, it's easier to hide with your pinching. If it was right in the middle, then it would be more noticeable. But you could hide that by when you do the little veining with your needle tool. So not a big deal. I'm always searching for where that the wire tip is, because I want to make sure that that is pretty close to the end of the leaf. Okay, so now we have all of our flower components. 6 crocus petals, a fun little stamen, and a couple of leaves. Now, I chose not to bend any of these leaves, but you still could. Like right now, the clay is warm, so it's a slight bit flexible. And I'm just going to go ahead and bend these just a little teeny bit. Not a lot, but just a little, or you can leave them perfectly straight. But while this clay is still nice and warm like this, it should accommodate a bend very easily. So just a little bit there. Okay, so now we're going to create the background and start assembling things after we create like little painterly crocuses. Okay, you with me? Let's do it. So to put everything on, to assemble this all together, I'm going to use just my blue mixture clay, and I'm going to make like a little oval cameo. All right. And I often like to put it onto a nonstick surface, but from here on, this is going to become the plate that I bake on. So you totally can leave it on your plate or your glass tile or your ceramic tile. I always recommend a ceramic tile. So I'm just going to make a circular medallion type shape. And I want to turn this into sort of like a kind of flattened hamburger bun where it's a little bit more rounded in the center and flatter at the edges. Kind of, you know, that whole classic sort of cameo thing. I think that is a wonderful medallion shape. It looks very pretty and it lends itself to a lot of other decorative places to go, like we talked about. I often incorporate some polymer clay centerpiece and then make a mosaic on it from there. That's one of my favorite things. So it becomes like the thing in the middle, and then the mosaic frames it as well as adding additional elements. So I might continue out and do some, you know, crocuses or at least flower looking shapes with my beads or whatever, or just use a bunch of golden beads and make it look like there's a frame around. Who knows? Who knows what I will do with this? For those of you that are in the creative circle, this is often things that we do on our demo on our live Sundays, is that we will take a project from our creative circle month and we will extend it out and start making additional things to it as kind of our bonus for people who have joined the circle. So if you are a circle member watching this, that's something we'll do in upcoming weeks. If you're not, consider joining the circle, because there's a lot of bonuses that we do and taking our creative ideas even farther. All right, so now I'm pressing it down on my surface. And since this is going to pop off once it's baked, I'm not worrying about it. I'm not going to move it anymore. It's going to stay put right here. I'm especially taking care. There's a few areas that have a little bit of cracks on them, so I'm making sure those look good. Now, I am not trying to make this surface smooth. I love when people can do that. I think it looks beautiful. I already know that that's not me. I am not somebody who is symmetrical or neat and tidy. So what I'm trying to do is take my proclivity for creative chaos and keep it balanced and harmonious. And that is where my strength is. So I'm not going to try and do a thing I'm not good at. I'm going to try to take the thing I naturally do and perfect it. So in order to do that, what you want is you want it to be clean, no hairs or smudges or whatever. You want your fingerprints to all overlap. You want the shape to be pleasing. Now, I made this sort of an egg shape, but I could have made it a bean or some other asymmetrical shape, which is fine. As long as it looks balanced and looks pleasing, we're good to go. So now what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up putting our crocus, our three-dimensional crocus, up here and kind of coming down with some grasses or more mossiness or whatever down here. But we want to kind of give the illusion of other little crocuses in the distance. So basically, here is the direction we would go on that, is we would make a couple of little clusters of crocus back here so that it looks like it's not just all by itself. You don't have to do that. I just think it looks kind of good. So let's do that. And I'm going to grab my little purple clay, and we're going to just make kind of crocusy shapes. It doesn't have to be real detailed. In fact, it's better if it's not, because it's out in the distance. But we want to put a few of them out there to make it feel like there's additional crocus in the yard, right? So I'm going to just take a little ball of clay about this big. Okay, and that will be our little crocus petal. I'm going to do a couple of those and a couple of little smaller too, because we might, put those little narrow ones. I'm just going to play with it. We'll see what happens. Okay, so that's enough for maybe 3 little crocuses. Okay, all right, so I'm going to just roll this out into that same sort of petal shape and flatten it a little bit. So see how I've got just sort of a flattened shape there. And I'm going to just put that one right there. And we'll just put another flattened one next to it. Kind of like, petals there. So that's crocus number 1. And let's go ahead and do a stem so that we can at least know where all the stems are going to be as we overlap. Okay, so let's have a little snake like this. We don't want it to be too big. That might even be a little big. Okay, so there's the first one. Okay, then let's put another one. You know what? Let's put our leaves on too, because we're going to assume that there's this is the one in the background, and then there's more in front of it. So we'll put a couple of leaves here. Okay, so we've just got little flat leaves like that. Okay, that's enough. Then we're going to put this crocus right about here. Now, how do you know what goes where? I'm just guessing, and hoping that it looks good. You can experiment a little bit on your plate and put it on the plate and then transfer it over. If you don't like that idea of experimenting and then hoping it turns out, I would totally respect that. Okay, so there's that. Let's give another couple of leaves here. And I'm not being overly creative at the moment on the leaves. They're just kind of sticking beside, so I'll do that for this one. I'll put a little leaf in front like that. Doesn't that look good? Okay. But I've been just kind of doing 3, in the typical leaf way. Okay, so now we've got 2. And this whole thing is going to be here. So I think we can still put one more over in this area, like a cluster. I don't like lining things up. I do tend to like clusters of things better. Like, you know, almond chocolate clusters are really good. And flower clusters. And you can even make some that are little buds, which means they don't have the petals showing yet. It's up to you how you want to do it. And we're going to make some lines and put some powders in and all that stuff. So. Okay, so there is our little leaves. I think that looks good, don't you? Let's add a few details. So I'm going to use this tool so I can just make some more controlled little lines on my leaves to make them look different than the stems. Okay, and then I'm also going to put a little bit of lines on the crocus so we can get some purple in there. Now we got to be careful with our powders here because it's really easy to get the powder off the petals and then onto the background, which can look kind of weird. So we're going to be very careful. Use a smaller brush. Don't put any lines on your stem, okay? If you do, it's not the end of the world. Just try not to. All right, so now I'm going to get a small brush and do my little purple, just kind of on the surface here. And I'm mostly kind of making it down on the base of these. So I'll hit it just with a little bit of tape, and hopefully it'll also kind of stay down in the bottom of the petal, which I think looks really cute, don't you? Okay, so let's get our tape. And I saw a little piece that's trying to sneak into the clay over here, so I'm going to use my tool to kind of tap and get that away. So now we'll just kind of hit that on the surface there, and that exposes those lines a little bit. That feels nice and crocusy, doesn't it? And let's use the same small little brush with our green and just get a little bit of green here and there. If I had a deeper green with me, then I could get some better contrast with these greens, but I don't. So I'll try to use my yellow to make some areas brighter. Now what I also want to do is I want to make it feel like it's in the grassy, mossy area, right? So I'm going to put a little bit more green here. And we're going to scratch that up a bit to make it look like grasses, mosses, whatever. We'll do some more too around the flower once we get it all set, but I'll just show you what I mean. So I've got some greenery like that, and now you can take this tool or you can take your scratch tool. Either one works. I'm going to use my Wow It's Awesome tool because I have a nice curved little blade here. You can use a needle tool as well, and we're going to scratch this all up. Now you can do two different things. You can make this look like grasses, in which case you're going to do little scratches like this, and then we'll put some more powder over that. Or you can kind of scribble it like this to make it feel more mossy. And I've done I think I'm going to do the mossy one just because I always love that look. And it's a little different contrast. Often will do this and then put the powder over it afterwards, not first. But I just thought, I'm going to put the powder there so we get kind of some different colors, variations going on in the powder. Now you really want to make this all on top of each other so that it is a mossy feel. And right now I'm in the Pacific Northwest here in Oregon where my kids are. And I have got mosses everywhere, which has been so inspirational. I love moss. I grew up in the South and we had woods behind our house that we just spent most of our childhood running around in. And there was it was an old forest, so there was big oak trees and lots of moss around the little creeks and streams. And I just loved the proportion of it because it makes it feel like it's its own miniature world, you know, like it's its own grass or lawn or whatever. I just think it looks really fun. All right, so now I've got that all mossed up. I've picked up all the little scribbly bits, and then I'm just going to go in with my green and go back over. This kind of helps push down any wayward clumps. I'm getting some yellow in there too, so we've got some variety of color. And you see how you've got all those little flaky bits there? You can just get rid of those. And we'll get it down in. And then you can kind of take a look and see if anything needs additional scraping up. But it makes a kind of nice background, don't you think? Kind of give those, oh, I didn't mean to blow them all away. I was just trying to get this little one, but I think that's actually, there we go. All right, so that gives it a nice little mossy edge there, and we'll continue to do that as needed. Are you ready for the fun part? This is going to be interesting. So here's our theory. What we're going to do is, using liquid clay, we're going to stab these guys into the background, another reason why we made it nice and thick, and create the open crocus. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to start with sort of sorting these, seeing what size is what, and put the bigger ones. Probably should be in the front, but you know what? I'm just going to take them randomly. It doesn't matter. So what I want to do is I want to kind of position these into the clay like this. Now I'm going to use the liquid clay because otherwise it's not going to stay. But I'm going to put these first three in and kind of get a feel for the curve of everything. So now I'm going to take it out. I'm going to put some liquid clay on the bottom of my petal, all right? And I'm going to shove that in so it will grab. Okay, I'm going to do that to each one of these. So I started with a little grab. Whoop. Nice fresh bottle, so it's nice and gooey. And I'm using the translucent. There are other liquid clays that are colored, and you certainly can use those if you wish. I want it to be, all of my mistakes to go away. So I'm going to make that as clear as I can. Okay, so I've got that one behind and these two sort of in front. So that's a start. Now we're going to want this. But I have a feeling that that wire there is maybe a little bit too long. So I'm going to actually pinch that off while I think of it. And then I'm going to stab this little one right in the center there, okay? Now we can add some clay around there and kind of clean up what's going on in there because that might be hard to do later because we'll want to add like maybe a little bit of color or something. So I'm just going to take a bit of this white and grab my tool. This time I'm going to use the Can't Live Without It tool. And I'm just going to kind of pinch this little circular thing around so that there's no blue back there, okay? I don't want the blue. I want there to be what looks like flour. So I'm just going to put this little bit of white in there, mush that all down. We can add some color later, but the white is also just appropriate. Okay, so now these are going to be coming for the rest of the circle, which means I might have to trim away any extra. So let's see, put some glue here so I can dip it in. Okay, so here's one more. So I'm kind of eyeballing completing the circle, right? And I feel like I want this to kind of lay back a little bit more so I can see this crocus pattern that we've got. But I think it's just going to be what it is. In fact, I do want that a little bit more because we're going to have to make the stem, right? So let's lay that back. So see what I'm doing is I'm laying that a little bit more. Save those. You might be able to use them for something. Okay. Okay, so now I want to just sort of curve these things around so that they're opening well and they look good. Lay back as needed. Okay, so there is our crocus. Now I'm getting in there and just cleaning up any goofy bits, trying for there not to be blue in there, but having that white. So just kind of mushing it around seems like it's working just fine. Okay. And we'll go back to our Wow It's Awesome to kind of clean up around here. I'm going to get rid of this liquid clay too because I have a tendency to stick my fingers in it. Okay, so I'm just using my tool to get rid of any gouges, smooth that all up. Now, when we look at this, it's going to be kind of facing you in this direction. So you're not going to see as much of the patterning because of that, but you are going to see any of these petals that are not correct. So I'm going to actually fiddle with that one and make sure that I've got them correct so that they look good from all angles. That one I think could use just a tiny bit more white down in there. And actually I'm going to move that one a little bit closer. Okay, there we go. That's where the white can be. That's going to hold that in much better. I'm kind of pushing the clay up against the petal, make sure it's holding that up properly. Okay, I feel like that's looking pretty good. I decided I will put just a little bit of yellow inside there. It looks a little bit more intentional. So I think that is good. There we go. Okay, so see we've got this big one sitting there now. This one's kind of coming straight at us, which proportionately it would be nice if it was laying down a little bit more, but this is how it worked out. So I'm okay with that. I think it looks good. You can experiment a bit to see if you want to do something different. And I also feel like this petal here, I kept playing with it to try to scooch it closer and it just didn't want to. So you know what? I'll let it be. But I think we're okay. I think it looks nice. We've got the yellow in there mixed with the white. That stamen is looking pretty great. Got a little bit of white there. Put a touch more yellow. Boop, boop, boop. There's a little bit of liquid clay there, but that will not be a problem once it bakes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make a stem. We're going to add some of the leaves. And we're going to kind of play the game that it is popping up out of the ground. So I'm going to make this stem, right? And it would be coming out from basically there. And crocus stems are fairly thick. You know, they got some heft to them. So I'm just kind of pressing it in a little bit of a wedge like this so I can tuck it right up to that center spot and have it come down like this. Okay, so that looks pretty nice. And we're going to have these guys popping all up. But in the meantime, we're going to make some similar ones just to be on the background. So let's flatten this out so it looks like those. And put some powder and some stripes, striations, veins, whatever we want to call it, with our tool. And let's get a little powder on there. There's my green brush. All right. Let's put that one right up here. Pressed on. Okay. And I'm just going to see what this looks like to add one of these. Again, the liquid clay, if I didn't say this earlier, liquid clay is used, to make fresh clay stick to baked clay. And I'm going to go and wipe up that little extra right there, make sure there's not any shiny bits. Okay, so I'm going to take this one now and sort of stick it right in here. If I want it to go that way or this way. See how it grabs like that? It's pretty nice, huh? I think like that. So there's one back there and one up here. So that's nice. Get that extra. And once that soaks in a little bit, I'll put some powder on it too that will minimize. So this one can be just sticking out a little bit here. This one can be like this. So we'll get a couple more in the background. So this is looking okay, right? Now I have a lot of blue showing back there, which I don't really want. I want it to be more green. So before I go any farther, I'm just going to take my green with this brush and kind of tuck it back in on here, just so that it has a little bit more of a in the lawn kind of feel. So we're playing with perspective. We're looking at the side here. This is coming at you. We're playing that kind of Egyptian trick, I think, where we've got stuff coming at different directions. Are you okay with that? I feel like I'm okay with it. And there's, in the granite clay, there are little mica flakes. And sometimes they are where I don't want them from a design perspective. So I'm trying to make that one come away. Okay. Let's flatten this up. Add a little tiny leaf back here. Okay, I feel like that gives it's really helping it look like it's kind of coming forward up here. So I like that. We've got that nice little back skyish area over there. If you have blue, you can pop that color if you want a little bit. I'm just making sure I don't have any weird fingerprints on there. I think our other little crocuses in the background are looking great. So let's just do some scratchings around here and see what happens. Okay, what do you think? Now remember, you're going to be looking at this, you know, the way you're seeing it. Like I'm looking at it from the side, but as you're making it, make sure that you tip it up from time to time and you like what you see from that direction too, because that's the direction you're going to most likely see it from. But I think this is looking really good. So now we're just going to want to bake it, right? Let's talk about baking. Okay, so you know the drill with baking. It's really easy. If you've not ever done polymer clay baking before, I have a video in my YouTube channel about baking with polymer clay. It'll be in the description. You can just click on over there, watch the whole thing, and get up to speed. But what you're going to just want to remember is preheat your oven. Use an oven thermometer so you know the accuracy of the interior oven temperature. Bake for the recommended time on your clay package. I'm going to bake mine for about an hour. Now, I told you as we were going along that I might use the heat gun to kind of set parts of it. It didn't look like it needed it. All those little petals just went right in and are good. But if you're having trouble with any of your petals flopping, once you get them into position, you can prop them up with little bits of toilet paper or tissue paper and heat gun. Just pay attention that that paper doesn't get too hot. And you can absolutely bake in the oven with paper to prop things up. So if you're worried about anything drooping and falling, I usually always put a little bit of paper propping just to make sure everything stays while it's hardening. Because what's happening with polymer clay is it's getting like softer first and then it hardens once it hits that temperature. So the clay is kind of like coming up to heat, and that heat is what's hardening it. So sometimes having a little prop while it's getting to that temperature is helpful. Bake it for the recommended time. I'm going to bake mine for 45 minutes to an hour, then let it cool completely. And to take it off of your surface, I usually take my cutting blade and just kind of tuck it underneath and give it a little twist, and then it releases the grip from your surface of the work surface and pops right off. Okay? And then after that, all you've got to do is decide what you're going to do with it next, including nothing. You could just put it in one of those little easels and look at it. You could take a little piece of wire and use polymer clay if you want to, or glue to attach the wire on the backside so you can hang it up as just a little mini wall piece. I have shown you many times how to add that little wire on the back, but essentially you're just using a little liquid clay. You're putting your wire, a little bit of flattened ball of clay in between the wire, the liquid clay, to kind of sandwich it in there and then hit it with that heat gun. You know how to do that. If you don't, just message me and I'll tell you. Or look at one of my other videos that has it in there, or go to the Creative Circle if you remember and ask, because we've done that many times. All right, guys, how fun was that, right? I really love how that project turned out. I am really looking forward to exploring what to do with it next in the Creative Circle, if you remember. See you next time. Happy spring.